This episode of LA Meekly is brought to you once again by Podcorn. Podcorn is a marketplace connecting podcasters to podcast sponsorships, such as host-read ads like this one, interview segments, topical discussions, and more. It gives podcasters the creative freedom and full control of when and how they want to monetize their show by finding companies that they can run ads for. There's no middleman. Podcasts of all sizes can browse sponsors and choose the right opportunity for them. You set your own rate. Never give up any rights to your podcast, which is the most important thing. And Podcorn is always there to make sure it goes smoothly.
Well, I'll say it once again. I wish we had this earlier because we were looking for something just like this.
Running ads for companies that we like and other shows that we think are interesting. So that's the whole thing. You get to pick. It's not like you sign up and Podcorn assigns like, you're going to be doing an ad for big oil spills. You get to pick companies that align with your audience and your interests. So it's a really great thing. It's a good way to make money if you have your own podcast, which I know all of you do, actually. Every single one of you.
So when you're born, you get a birth certificate and you get a podcast you have to run.
Here's how you breastfeed. Here's your RSS feed. So if you want to get involved, that's podcorn.com. That's podcorn.com.
Get started.
Hey there, sports fans. The only sports song I know. I think that's two episodes in a row for two different sports that I've sang that song as the beginning for sports talk.
I want to say it's embarrassing, but it's still more than I know. It could be both, I guess.
It's a sports song for, first, a sport that I don't know which one it is, and second, for a TV broadcast of it that hasn't happened since the 90s.
I still sing the old-timey football song. And then, like, he's got a leather helmet.
That's an American anthem.
Yeah, it all plays of football games in old movies.
John Philip Sousa wrote the theme for the NFL. Now that we've talked about not baseball, we're here to talk baseball. The old, not pigskin.
The old zebra skin. I don't know animals. I don't know skin. I don't know sports.
Here we have a special mid-month episode, another interview, this time with friend of the show, I'd say, at this point. Yeah,
I'd say friend of the show.
And friend of us as well. We have Eric Nusbaum, author of Stealing Home, Los Angeles, the Dodgers, and the Lives Caught in Between.
One of the best books about LA history, I think, in my opinion. One of the most readable books about LA history.
As we talk about in the episode, it came out about a year ago, and we were planning on doing an interview with him at Dodger Stadium, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm not going near Dodger Stadium, so we just...
To be tested, to be vaccinated, I'm not going near it.
I don't believe in
I think it's all fake. I think Dodger Stadium is fake.
I always thought that baseball was a hoax. Yeah, we're talking with him about his book, which is about the creation of Dodger Stadium, and more importantly, we talked about it in one of our baseball episode, but not as well or in depth as his book goes into about the whole ordeal with creating Dodger Stadium.
And it seemed like a big ordeal. It wasn't just like, you guys get out of here. Like, it was like a giant net was thrown over and all these people got caught in it.
Yeah, it's definitely a book everybody should read, and we didn't even get to talk about in the episode that on the back cover, I think it is, of the book, there's a quote from Dr. Dre about like how much he loves this book. And then also just a few months ago, Bob Odenkirk tweeted about the book like, hey, I love this book and I better call
Mr. Show. Are we talking about the same person? Oh my god, we are. That guy has a good career.
I mean, it's already a popular book. You probably already heard about it, but it's also now it's available on paperback if you want that version of it. If you don't, you want to put it in your back pocket when you go ride your wooden scooter to Dodger Stadium.
And you want to read a page or a paragraph in between something that happens at frequent intervals.
Like waiting in between getting your vaccine and the 15 minutes when you can leave.
Waiting at a red light for it to turn green. I'm going to read a chapter real quick.
I asked him where he wants people to buy it from. He recommends your local bookstore. So any local bookstore of yours.
We recommend Vroman's.
Skylight Books, whatever. Oh yeah, Vroman's. We talked about Vroman's. Forget Skylight Books. Vroman's.
Last Bookstore.
Vroman's.
We haven't done an episode on those, Greg.
They don't exist as far as they're not canon. But he wanted to let everybody know about, he has a newsletter now about different sports stories and sports history.
I didn't know this.
That's because we're bad interviewers.
Can you do me a favor? Can you tell me before you tell them?
Greg, Eric wanted me to let you know to eat his shorts.
Okay.
So take note.
Okay, cool.
I'll make sure to do that. But for everybody else, he wants you to go to sportsstories.com sportsstories.substack.com. So that's sports stories, sportsstories.substack, substack.com.
Short stories, got it.
Don't you dare, Greg. Eat his shorts. So
Eat his short stories.
Eat my short fiction. So sign up for his newsletter if you like his writing, which I've always been a fan of his writing. We talked about when he did an article about Anze Kopitar for Sports Illustrated. I was so excited, and I went to the Kings training rink the same day he was there, just so I could see him at work and maybe see Anze Kopitar, and all I saw was Jim Fox.
And all I got was Jim Fox. I talked to you earlier about how when we're interviewing Eric, and we know him personally, you know him better than I do, but we both know him personally, but as soon as the interview starts, it becomes very professional, and we were still like Chris Farley from SNL. We're like, so Dodgers, huh? He's like, yeah. Oh, cool, man. Cool. That's great.
He's a very smart guy, and he knows this subject inside and out. He knows everything there is to know about. I feel like he knows everything there is to know about every sport, and he decided to just pour a little bit of his knowledge into this book specifically about the creation of Dodger Stadium. So we recommend his book, Stealing Home, Los Angeles, the Dodgers, and the Lives Caught in Between. If you're new to our show, hey, listen to us. We've covered
pre-Dodger baseball. We've covered our own Chavez Ravine story.
And just LA history in general is what we do. You know, we were mentioned in the footnotes of this book, so we have a little bit of credentials. We're published as well.
Seeing our name in print, it's weird, and it points out how stupid the name of the show is. I'm like, we should have been something smarter and cooler.
We release episodes on LA history every month. If you want to check us out, you found us this way, but you can also find us on iTunes and
Spotify, YouTube.
Let me
listen to an episode real quick.
Let me just play. Here's a taste of it. Hey, we're here to talk about.
Whack, 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 whack. Waka, waka, waka.
You could follow our Twitter at LA Meekly, but also you could follow Eric's Twitter, where he tweets a lot, again, about sports, at Eric Nuss. So without further ado, here is our interview with Eric Nusbaum talking about his book, Stealing Home, Los Angeles, the Dodgers, and the Lives Caught in Between.
See you on the other side.
You won't. See you in 2 weeks, I guess is what the other side means to Greg.
A fortnight. The other side of a fortnight.
See you in a fortnight, folks. And if you're new to the show, that's how we sign off every episode.
Every single episode.
All right. Enjoy.
It's nice to have you here after a year of not having you here, because we were supposed to do this last March.
When did your book come out?
Last March.
This has started. It started. So
are we podcasting now? Is this a podcast?
Yeah.
Wait, is this thing on? Now I don't even remember the answer to the question.
Oh my god.
The book came out last March, March 24th.
It was going to be literally like a year ago that we were going to do this at Dodger Stadium, and now Dodger Stadium's like a biohazard center.
I mean, in a sense, it always has been.
Oh my god! And that brings me to my first question. Did coronavirus start at Dodger Stadium? Did you just get an award also?
I did. I actually have the medal on the table over here, but I have headphones on, so I'd have to unplug them to go get it. I think you would like to see it because it has an LA Kings lanyard that it's on right now. Hold on.
Did it come with that?
I know this is a confusing message, but here's a lanyard for hockey.
To the best goalie.
So this is the Seymour Medal from the Society for American Baseball Research.
Oh my god,
it's really big. Not to brag, but I opened up the envelope and I couldn't believe how large it was. You could use it as a coaster for like a
it's heavy?
Big beer. Oh yeah,
it's a Mr. T style medallion.
It is. I feel a little bit like Flavor Flav when I wear it.
He won one of those awards too, didn't he?
I think so.
That's pretty. You're gonna wear it?
I'm actually not because it's uncomfortably.
And they also gave me this crown.
I gotta wear it with this robe while these people fan me. Not a big deal. I'm very humble.
Just trying to live my best life in the pandemic.
Yeah, well, his personal trainer's rubbing his shoulders. His publisher's rubbing his shoulders. So first about you, because I have to ask about you. Where did you grow up in LA? Was it Culver City the whole time?
It was Culver City the whole time. I mean, I was born...
What a twist.
Not technically in Culver City, in like Hollywood. When I was like 2, we moved to Culver City. Yeah, I'm a Culver City native, I would say. This is back in the day, before Culver City became such a destination. I like to think I played a part in that.
You've always been a big proponent of Culver City, much to my confusion.
Have I?
You've been well. Both you and Alex are big pusher. You always want me to come to Culver City, and it's like impossible to get there. Like it's like I can never find the entryway to Culver City.
There's like 5 freeways that stop in Culver City. That's the appeal of it.
But the ones I always use take me like just outside of Culver City, and then I can't penetrate into Culver City. There's like
there's an income threshold now.
You have to show your tax forms first.
Starting in like 2009, that was the rule.
I think I've already said this on the podcast before, but I've known Eric a very long time. I've known you since 2005 or 2006?
5-ish, somewhere around there.
We went to Israel and Poland together, and we shared a room at one point.
It was fun. Part of it was fun.
Okay, your book, like we said, it came out right at the beginning of when all this started, which is so frustrating because I know you had this podcast lined up, I know that much, but you had better things to do also, like the LA Times Book Festival. You had a ton of really fun stuff planned, and then everything got screwed up. So what was it like promoting a book during this?
It's hard to really compare it to anything because I haven't gotten to promote a book in any other way. I've only ever been a COVID book promoter. I was really excited about the LA Times Book Festival. I was going to be on a panel with Mike Davis, which was terrifying to me, but also kind of thrilling. It was going to be really cool. I don't know. I was excited about going to New York to talk at the Brooklyn Historical Society. It was making me feel like I was a little bit important. But
look how far you've fallen.
I know. I've literally fallen to the exact same place I was when this all started. I think there's been some benefits to the whole promoting a book during the pandemic thing. The main one that I've sort of realized recently is that it's given me a productive outlet while I've been stuck at home. So I've been able to just like focus on self-promotion as a way to stay sane.
Yeah, you have been able to do more things since you could literally give an interview anywhere in the world from your home now.
Yeah, and there's a benefit to that.
Yeah, so you're lucky this pandemic hit, aren't you? Say it.
Won't say it.
I almost got him.
Recording.
I didn't know this was going to be a gotcha journalism kind of thing.
That's the title of the Zoom meeting. It was just gotcha. What were you going to say, Greg?
I was going to say your book came out the summer before the Dodgers won the World Series for 28 years?
I think it was 32 years because it was or 31 because it's the same. The last time they won was my birth year. So
88.
That's as
88.
much as I know about the Dodgers.
You're wearing a shirt that says Dodgers right now.
I know, Greg got it for me. I'm wearing it for you, but it's a Kings logo that says Dodgers. So it's
I recognize the Kings logo.
It's my protest to you.
It was kind of them.
I was going to say, do you take credit for that? For giving all the minds on Dodger Stadium and the Dodgers?
I don't know if I take credit, but I do appreciate the generosity of the team to do something to help me promote my book. It was a weird thing because the Dodgers weren't participants in stealing home. They didn't really respond to my interview requests, and they have shown no interest in talking about the history that I talk about in the book. But in their own way, by winning the World Series, I hope they've helped a little bit with getting other people to talk about it.
Did they really not want anything to do with it?
No.
Do you think it was just because, who's Eric, or did they were ashamed or something like that?
I don't think it was about me in a good way or a bad way. I think it was more about that they don't really want to engage with this stuff, with these events. They're complicated and they're messy, and the Dodgers seem to prefer just ignoring it. I've heard from people who have been on the stadium tour that when you go on the stadium tour, they don't talk about what happened before. It's very much the official history.
Right.
My assumption is that that's just their policy and that nothing would make them change it.
I came up with really good questions, so I'm going to get to that later. But first, just tell us what your book is about for people who don't know.
Sure. My book is about the long, messy events that preceded the construction of Dodger Stadium. LA Meekly listeners know that you guys have done an episode on this.
That's another thing. Do you credit us a lot for this book also?
You're in the acknowledgements.
Yeah, we are.
I know you were fishing for that one, Dan.
Just say it.
The story is really, the book is about these 3 communities that used to be there where what we now call Chavez Ravine is. and in particular one family called the Arechiga family that lived in Palo Verde, not Palos Verdes. So it follows this family as they, migrate from Mexico to Arizona into LA. They build a home, they establish a life in the city, dealing with all the structural racism, all the good and bad things about America for decades before, in the late 40s, the city leaders decide that the site of their neighborhood would be better served as the site of a very large public housing project. And the book also tracks this public housing advocate named Frank Wilkinson, and he's a fascinating guy who gets eventually blacklisted as a communist, which leads to the cancellation of the housing project. This is the really short version, and the eventual construction of Dodger Stadium at the site where the housing project was supposed to be. There's a lot of Red Scare politics, there's a lot of real estate history, there's a lot of baseball history, and ultimately, we know the end.
Yeah. With an acknowledgement of L.A. Meekly.
Exactly.
That's the thing about I really like your writing style. I got the audiobook of it last summer, and it's written really well. It feels very narrative, and it makes you have a way of making all of these separate things seem like they're going to converge and it's inevitable. I guess because I know about Dodger Stadium. The book's incredible, by the way.
Thank you.
Dan would never say that, but I would.
This podcast is incredible.
Stop it.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
That I really appreciate that, Greg, because I think the sense of inevitability was a big part of what I was going for when I wrote it. Obviously, the book has a lot of moving pieces to it, a lot of short chapters. It's complicated structurally, probably more than it needed to be. But I don't think when you read, you can feel that much, hopefully. Yeah. And the looming sense of disaster or triumph, depending on your perspective, is, I think, kind of what makes the narrative work.
Where did you do all your research? Because you went pretty deep into a lot of stuff.
A lot of places. So the first part of it was talking to people. I'm a, journalist more by training, not even by training, more by experience. So, getting interviews with folks who lived in these communities or who knew people who did, interviews with, the families that I was writing about. That was a hard process because it required earning their trust as an outsider. This story has been told a lot of times by a lot of different people, and I don't think that people who lived it have been particularly satisfied with most of those tellings, in part because it gets told from this very kind of bird's eye view where the humanity of the people involved is a little bit lost. And so I really wanted to make sure I kind of focused on that and made it as intimate as possible. And with that, I had an obligation to get it right and to be empathetic and to really try to capture what it was like in Palo Verde, for example, and what these people were like to the best of my ability, working decades after this place stopped existing. So the first part of it was just listening to people. The other part was archives. There's a lot of really great libraries in Southern California. The Southern California Library in South Central was huge. The Charles Young Research Library at UCLA, Cal State Northridge, Cal State LA. I was kind of bouncing around between different archives.
Did you go to the Institute for Baseball Studies at Whittier College?
I did.
That was the last thing I did before I had to not go to work anymore.
Whittier Poets.
Who are they?
That's their sports teams. They're called the Poets.
What?
Isn't that amazing?
I bet they get picked on by the other teams, don't they?
Our victory was poetic.
Their whole, thing at Whittier College is amazing with baseball history. They're kind of the host for the Baseball Reliquary, too, which is this
They have like Babe Ruth's finger bone?
Kind of, the equivalent of that stuff. It's a Hall of Fame type place, but it's like an alternate Hall of Fame. So they celebrate like the weirdness of baseball and the esoteric nature of its history instead of celebrating like who's the best. The guy who ran it forever and who started it and who was sort of the soul behind it, Terry Cannon, passed away recently, unfortunately. But it's a treasure. It's one of those like great weirdo LA treasures.
Did you meet them at the USC thing? What was
Bazaar?
The Bazaar.
Archives Bazaar?
Is that where you met them?
I had known them before, but they are always there.
I have some pens from their booth.
They had a gimmick one year where they would give you something for free if you could see how many baseballs you could fit in your hand. In
cool.
one single hand. Yeah, it was great. I have too many photos of me doing that, by the way.
How many baseballs could you fit?
5. I
Yeah,
think it was
right.
5. 5! Maybe 4. I can't remember. I gotta go to the pictures.
I put them all in my mouth like the Guinness World Records guy. They didn't give me anything for that. Were the people who you talked to, the family, the descendants of the families and everybody, were they happy with the book?
Yeah, I think for the most part they were. The families were really generous with me, and I tried to in turn, do them justice as much as I could. There's a sense that for me where it's like, I have sort of this mixed feeling about writing about other people's lives in a story that's been like such a traumatic experience where like I'm now like the one associated with it. It's like, oh, Eric's book about Dodger Stadium, but really it's their story. Like, yeah. I feel like the Arechiga family in particular, they lived through this in a traumatic way, and it's echoed through generations in their family, and it's defined many of them years later still. So they have obviously a big family and different perspectives on it, but for everybody who I spoke to in that family and kind of connected to that family, I'm deeply grateful, and hopefully the book highlights their voices more than anything else.
Did you feel a lot of pressure? Because I would feel a lot of pressure to make like you were saying, to do it justice and make sure it wasn't distasteful or anything like that. Not that you would be distasteful, but I would be.
Every time you write about somebody else's life, you feel that. At least I do. I feel like the thing that animates me the most when I'm writing about somebody is just like wanting to like respect them on the page, right? Even if it's like saying something bad about them, but you have to say the bad thing, like talk about the flaws in a way that's accurate and true to how they really are or were, because otherwise, I don't know, it's just wrong. Like the idea of me giving somebody the chance to write about my life and like opening up to them about my family or me personally, it's a lot of trust to put in somebody else. And so when somebody puts that trust in me, I try to take it seriously. Do
you think your biography's coming out soon? The Eric Nusbaum biography? I'm halfway through. I'm on the part where
I need daily updates.
Yeah, this is the midpoint, is this interview. This is the midpoint of your life. Surprise.
That's kind of heavy.
I'm not pulling any punches on this one.
I'm a big fan of the Ken Burns baseball series that came out. I forget when. It's fantastic, but they don't talk about the West Coast too often. I guess because I'm local, I live like really I grew up like right around, I'm in Elysian Park, so I'm right around the corner from Dodger Stadium and Chavez Ravine. So a lot of locals know it. So I took a real issue with Ken Burns' thing, not bringing it up. I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, is this a LA story or a baseball story or baseball history? What do you like kind of categorize it? Or is it sort of like everything?
I guess it's a little bit of everything, kind of a mishmash. I think of it as being just like a story, like a good book, hopefully. That was my main goal. It's like, I want this to be, you mentioned a narrative, like I wanted it to feel like an emotional narrative and that you feel something at the end of it. Primarily, that was what I was thinking about. But from the baseball history side, I feel the same way as you, Greg. Like, it's always told from the East Coast perspective. I love the Ken Burns documentary too. There's a lot of great baseball books I love that practically don't mention California. There's books about the Brooklyn Dodgers moving to LA. There's so many books about the Brooklyn Dodgers. There's books about the LA Dodgers and Dodger Stadium that are sort of written from this like very New York perspective. And I just wanted to write something that felt like it was from the West Coast and from California and from LA. Obviously, I'm not from Echo Park or Elysian Park. I'm from Culver City, as we established. But
well, you were born in Hollywood.
I did think that we could.
It's in the biography.
I did think that was like necessary though, to tell the story from our perspective a little bit more.
And I appreciate that.
Why do you think that? Because, I mean, it's the same way, you see my hockey shirt. It's the same way with hockey also, is that everything is talked about on the, like, Ovechkin is the great, obviously he is kind of the best player, but there's, nobody talks about Anze Kopitar or Kings players or just West Coast players who are oftentimes as good or better than the people on the East Coast that they're talking about. So why is there always an East Coast sports bias?
I think one real reason is the time difference. It's just like too late on the East Coast for people to stay up and watch
10 p.m.
Adrian Kempe or whatever on the Kings. Like they're too tired. And I think that's a part of it. Like what you see is what you talk about. Also the East Coast is like, is the worst and the West Coast is better and all that stuff.
Official. It is now official.
Well, there goes your
official stance.
No more interviews at the Brooklyn Museum for you. Before we go deeper into the Dodger stuff, because you mentioned your previous journalism experience, which I was always so excited to hear who you were writing for. So tell us a little bit about what you did before this book.
So I wrote an article about Anze Kopitar for Sports Illustrated once.
That's the one Kings player I know.
The one thing that Dan really wants to talk about. He was very nice. Yeah, so I wrote magazine articles for Sports Illustrated and ESPN. I worked for Vice for a number of years, mostly as an editor, but also writing freelance for a lot of publications. I worked at a local TV news station in Seattle. I've worked at a Jewish newspaper. I've had a lot of media jobs and a lot of non-media jobs. It's been a journey to get to the point where I could write the book.
And you were writing in Mexico for a year, at least, weren't you?
Yeah, a couple of years in Mexico City.
What were you doing there? Living
the expat life in Mexico City. Mostly I was writing. I did a lot of writing there. And a lot of the book, Stealing Home, I think came out of that experience. Like I had been thinking about this book even when I lived there, and the chance to write about Mexico, live in Mexico, there's a lot of that time, and my kind of understanding of history and conquest and the relationship between the two countries grew a lot when I was living there. So I think it actually informed the book in a really good way too.
Well, that's what I want. That was my next question. Why did you pick this of all things to write a book about? Is it just spoke to you because of everything you were into?
It totally did. It's like the apotheosis. Is that even the right word? Is that a good word or a bad word? It sounded like the word I wanted to say.
I've never heard it before, so I'll just say that it's used correctly and heroically.
I'm going to stop the Zoom to look it up.
The book is definitely at the intersection of all the stuff that I'm really interested in, right? Like, I've written about baseball and culture. I really love history. I love LA. Like the
we
song.
love it.
It fits in that regard. When I was in high school in Culver City, California, at Culver City High School, I got a chance to hear Frank Wilkinson, who is a central character in the book, talk about his experience being blacklisted. And Frank came into the classroom and was like, Dodger Stadium should not exist, in this very gravelly voice. And I was like, it was mind-blowing to me.
You opened the book with that, and
I do.
It startled me because I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had. That's a great way to start the book, by the way.
From that moment, when I was 16 or whatever, like, I had this on my mind. And as I grew into being a writer, and I kind of always like wanted to be a writer, but it was a hard thing for me to admit to myself maybe. And when I finally got to that point where I was like, okay, I'm a writer now and I'm doing this, I knew this was the book I wanted to write. And I just kept on practicing until I was good enough to write it, I think. It was something I had tried to kind of like start on a few times earlier, and I had never really found the momentum or found the interest or found the right way in, but I'm glad I did it when I did.
Okay, so you liked the Dodgers growing up, correct?
Yes.
Or is there some into the microphone, a little closer into the microphone? Did all this research, learning all this stuff, change the way that you look at the Dodgers?
Yes and no. Like, obviously it did. I spent years working on a book about the Dodgers. I learned a lot about the Dodgers, good and bad, and about the history behind the stadium and about the history of LA. But I wouldn't say it like made me stop like loving the Dodgers in the way I already did, because that relationship has evolved a lot over the years. Like, my love for the Dodgers is part of like who I am. It's part of my relationships with my friends and my family. But I've also been writing about baseball professionally for like 10 years-ish. So your fandom evolves from that, right? Like, you have to start holding things at more of a distance. You have to learn how to be critical of things. And I had already, I think, reached that point before I started the book. That all said, when you sit with somebody and they tell you about their house that was demolished to make way for what ultimately became a stadium, and you can go sit in the top deck and look out and see where the elementary school is buried underneath the stadium parking lot, yeah, it definitely changes your relationship with the team.
That is complicated.
I had a teacher when I was at a trade tech who refused to go to Dodger Stadium or even support the Dodgers because of what had happened. And I feel like that's a thing with a lot of local residents, is that they want to completely shun it altogether. It's very complicated to like them, knowing it.
It's totally complicated, and it's a complicated thing because it's not just the Dodgers, right? Like, the Dodgers are a part of the story, and I would say that they should be talked about as part of the story, but like, they're not the whole story. The whole story is LA itself, and institutional corruption and racism and the kind of misguided notions of supposedly progressive idealists and the rampant evil of real estate developers in early 50s LA. Like, there's all these things that led into it.
Yeah.
So on one hand, yeah, like, if you want to protest the Dodgers, absolutely. Like, there's a group of descendants of the Arechiga family and the other families called Buried Under the Blue, right? And they are doing really great activism about tenants' rights in particular in LA, from this tradition of, you know, our family lost our home and we lost our community. And they talk about this history in a really, really lively way. They do amazing work. And they also sell shirts that say Displacers on them with the Dodgers logo.
I've seen those are great.
They're awesome shirts. I have a Displacers sticker on my computer. But that's a perspective that's totally valid. But they would also tell you that, like, yeah, the Dodgers were a part of it, but it's not just about the Dodgers. It's about understanding all the forces that are coming to bear on us. Those are the forces of, you know, late capitalism or whatever. They're the forces of how power gets wielded in cities and racism and corruption and just all the LA stuff and universal stuff. So the Dodgers are part of the story, but the Dodgers are not the whole story.
That's what I was thinking. I don't know if your book solidified it in my brain, but it's sort of like almost every big LA story is a land story to me. Like, land being taken or like land being coveted. Space is like a weird issue in LA. They always talk about how vast the Southern California is, but we're always fighting for land and space near the the city center.
It's true. And like I kind of had those moments when I was writing about it, like the 50s city council stuff and the fights over housing, and I was like, God, this is just like every like detective novel I've ever read about LA. Like I'm writing another Chinatown story, which is fun because it's like a great genre and I love that stuff. But like you're also kind of like, I'm not even trying to fall into these tropes and they're totally just right here.
That's Chinatown.
Dodger Town.
Forget it, Eric. That's Dodger Nation.
One quick question before you jump in. It's a dumb question. I know you've been asked it before, and you've been very explicit about us not asking stupid questions.
Did you grow up in Culver City?
I did not say anything about that.
Where exactly is Culver City? No.
It's where the 405 and the 10 meet.
Yeah, right.
And what does that even mean? Those coordinates? I had another teacher gush about your title, which is perfect. How'd you come up with the title?
My editor, Ben Adams, came up with the title, so he gets all the credit. And at first it was definitely going to be, I don't know, we didn't really know. We had a really hard time with it. And he kind of said it as a joke, like, baseball pun, stealing home. And I was like, no way. We can't call it stealing home. It's funny because my mom had suggested dugout as a title, like dugout for baseball. And I had this exchange with her. I was like, Mom, I'm not going to give my book a cheesy baseball pun for a title. And of course, like, lo and behold, I did. Thank you, Mom. Yeah, it worked out great. It's a really good title. And I actually kind of, the reason I came to embrace it as I started to think about all those, like, Philip Marlowe books and stuff like that, and the somewhat noirish nature of the story, I was like, let's just go for stealing home. It works.
Lean into it.
The big stealing home. My next question, because you talked about how on the official history of the Dodgers, they don't talk about any of this. So there's all this stuff like with the Redskins. Is that even a baseball team? What's the baseball equivalent? What's the baseball equivalent? Yeah, the Indians. And all of these teams in all sports that are facing, like, change your name and all that sort of thing. Is there going to be something like this ever for the Dodgers with this situation?
There should be. The Dodgers, tout themselves as the, progressive organization, despite just signing Trevor Bauer. They have a tendency to like talk about how global they are, and they really they go hard at promoting their Mexican American fan base, right? Like Viva los Dodgers and all that stuff. But like on the one hand, that's all well and good, and they've had iconic players from Japan, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Korea, all these places. But on the other, they had, Mexican Heritage Night on the 50th anniversary of the violent evictions of the Arechiga family, like a couple years ago. So there's going to have to be some kind of reckoning at some point. And I think it will happen soon. Like last summer when the teams were all putting out their Black Lives Matter statements and, videos with the players talking about how much they valued Black lives, like that was the sign that a sign to me that teams are being moved now by social movements and social events a little bit more maybe than before. And I think it's only a matter of time before the Dodgers start to be forced to reckon with this a little bit more. And I should also add, the city of LA needs to reckon with it and the county of LA needs to reckon with it. Like there needs to be official statements, there needs to be official movements towards some sort of reparation from city and county governments too. And I'm not really the one to talk about this. I'll also add that. Like that's my opinion. But, talk to Bear Down at the Blue or talk to people from those communities about what they think would be right.
What could they even put at, you said reparations and that sort of thing, but is there something they could put at Dodger Stadium to like a plaque at least or something, or like a statue or anything? I
think a plaque would probably not cut it.
No, you're not seeing the plaque that we're seeing, though.
This is a really big plaque.
The thing has to be like a dialogue that starts like genuinely from a place of wanting to talk about this stuff and engage with it. And that's really like what needs to be the first step. I think anything could happen. Like 20 years ago when they were under the Fox ownership, the Dodgers had a olive branch ceremony where they brought in some of the community members and they to the little parish over in Solano Canyon, and they held this little ceremony where they handed an olive branch to like the community members. It was super corny and insufficient. Yeah. And that's not the kind of thing you want to try to repeat.
Fair. Like I said, this is a really big plaque that we have in mind, though.
How do you feel about like Vin Scully being like, look, we're all looking out at This is my worst Vin Scully impression. We're all looking at Chavez Ravine. Part of me is like, oh, so you are acknowledging and aware that this was Chavez Ravine, but that's like as far as it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the words Chavez Ravine even don't really connect to anything specific now, right, other than Dodger Stadium. Like it's just the vibe. Chavez Ravine is sort of like I think I say in the book that it's like a state of mind, almost more than a place. And to me, that's what it is. Like, the three neighborhoods, right? They had their specific names and their specific identities, the Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop. And the people who live there are proud of those neighborhoods and those identities. Like you meet like a 90-year-old guy with a PV Palo Verde tattoo still. Like these are real places, and it's important to differentiate between like the cotton candy skies of Chavez Ravine now with the physical manifestation of those neighborhoods as they existed 60, 70 years ago.
I think you had even a chapter where you're saying like residents looked at this like or people who stumbled into it looked at it like it was a Shangri-La, and residents really saw it as a utopia, and Walter O'Malley and Frank Wilkinson all saw this area as something really special.
Yeah, it was a special place. Like, it was a utopia, and I think in like retrospect more than it was in reality. I think in reality what it was just a really like tight-knit neighborhood, and it was a great place to grow up for kids, right? You're in Elysian Park, basically. You have the hills at your disposal. It was awesome. It was also a place that was starved for resources because the city didn't want to like give them better streetlights and bus service, and they had to fight for each one of those things that, a neighborhood in Cheviot Hills or whatever would have gotten just fine. There was poverty, and there was problems, and there was fights and normal stuff in any neighborhood. And there was also, beautiful homes that a lot of them are still standing in LA today because they got moved by trucks to different parts of the city.
They're all in, was that area, the area by you?
Carroll
Street. Yeah. They filmed The Munster there?
Some of them, no.
The
To Kill a
Munster.
Mockingbird was filmed with houses from
Really?
communities. Yeah.
I had no idea. You probably said it and I forgot.
Yeah, I do remember. I do remember you teaching me that. That's crazy. But is there ever how could there be enough pressure on the city to make a change? Because like the Black Lives Matter stuff was national, if not global, and so everyone had to address it. But this is a specific LA thing. Like, what can people do to
I don't know.
put that pressure?
I'm not really sure. I'm not the person maybe to best answer that question.
You're all I've got.
I think the most you can do is just talk about it and think about it. And when you get, politicians and people in power thinking about these issues, then you maybe have a chance to start to make a change. But for the most part, we're still dealing with these issues when it comes to housing, when it comes to gentrification, when it comes to sports stadiums, when it comes to all this stuff is still happening in LA. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of desire to change the paradigm.
Yeah, that's weird because you mentioned the Dodgers saying, "Oh, we're a liberal organization," and then not even a plaque for this. But the whole city of Los Angeles is. I don't think it's true, but everyone has this image that LA's so liberal, it's such a progressive place, but like, no, clearly not.
There's different ways of being progressive. Also, first of all, like one of the things and you guys talk about this a lot on the podcast, but that blew my mind as I was researching the book was just how conservative LA used to be. Like, It was possibly the most conservative big city in America for 50, 60 years. And the power brokers in LA were these just like crazy right-wing dudes who like only worked to line their own pockets at the expense of everything else. And they were very transparent about it, which is really a gift to researchers. But there's still a lot of legacy of that in LA. And it's also worth thinking about like that the conservative liberal divide is not as simple as it seems, right? Like in the book, I talk about the Arechiga family, and they were conservative homeowners who became the target of a progressive idea in public housing. And when they were fighting to preserve their home and to stop the public housing project initially, their allies were conservative homeowners, not, supposed progressives. And that was complicated. It's not as simple as like, here's the brown people and here's the white people. These ideas are like deeply ingrained into our city of the value of generational wealth and the value of owning a home and what that means and doesn't mean. And we have a tendency to kind of write it off, and people who are like supposedly progressive will talk about growth and, needing to build more apartments and more transit. And I obviously think that's right on, but like you also have to think about the communities that are there in place. You have to think about what you're costing people. You have to think about who these decisions are affecting. And it's not as simple as liberal conservative.
Right.
It sounds simple.
Sorry, I'm getting kind of heavy. I know this is a humor podcast.
Greg, make a joke.
So there was this bird's nest, right? No, I got nothing.
If none of this had ever happened and the Dodgers never came to LA, would everyone just be an Angels fan? Or like what would be happening? Would it be the Chorrozeros? Everyone would be a Chorrozeros fan.
Biggest team in LA.
Hey, they were. I wish it was the Chorrozeros. I think like it would probably be the Angels. Another team would have moved here. I think it would be probably like some other baseball team would have just moved here in the 50s instead.
So
That's
was it just inevitable? Like if it wasn't the Dodgers, it would have been the Greg, name another baseball team.
Seattle Mariners.
I mean, they didn't exist until like the 70s, but
Greg, name another baseball team.
It could have been them.
Hollywood Angels.
No, I mean, it might have been them. Like it could have been one of the AAA teams from the Pacific Coast League went to the majors. There's a lot of ways it could have happened, and it didn't have to be, where Dodger Stadium is right now. There was a lot of sites in the 50s and 60s that were pretty ripe for building a stadium.
In Orange Grove, in Orange County, I could think of would have been a good place for a baseball stadium.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, like Walt Disney looked at the hills that became Dodger Stadium and decided it was too, not flat to build Disneyland there. I think the Orange Groves worked out pretty well for him.
I think he knows what he's doing.
What other topics in LA are you interested in writing a book about?
Podcasts.
Well, there's two. You can pick one to do a book on.
It's only two. I don't really have another LA book on my mind right now. What topics in LA would you want to see a book written about?
That's a good question.
You'd have to read a book, though. I realize this is a lot to ask.
Yeah. It's not just an old article.
Yeah. How about just like a video on KCET?
Let me call Nathan Masters and make that happen.
Oh, trust me, he returns all of my messages.
I always want to know more about the Sci-Fi Society meeting at Clifton's. I don't know why I'm so fascinated by that. All these dorks in the 50s who became like masters of their genre, getting free limeade and taking the bus or whatever at Clifton's.
Clifton's is so fascinating as a place.
It is.
I talk about it a little bit in Stealing Home, but like I wish I could read like a whole book. I mean, there is a book, but it's like a Clifton family official history, and it's interesting and good, but like a outsider history of Clifton's and cafeterias in LA actually would be awesome.
I remember when we did a long time ago our episode of where Wyatt Earp came to Los Angeles. You were like, I should write a book about Wyatt Earp coming to Los Angeles, and that would, because that doesn't make any sense at all. That famed gunslinger Wyatt Earp came to LA. There's just all these weird people who you'd never expect that just kind of lived out the end of their lives in like the Rosecrans that we were talking about in the last episode. This Civil War Union general just kind of retired to Redondo Beach.
I mean, it's a nice place to retire to, I guess.
Have you seen the boardwalk? That grimy
Hard to find a parking spot, though.
The whole city was a parking spot back then. Are you interested in doing another book on anything at all? Or it's
I am, but I'd like to do another history book, but I'm not there yet in terms of like writing it or even talking about it, to be honest.
Not even with us?
Not even with you.
That's all my innovative questions I had written down. Do you have any more, Greg?
Just stupid ones. What do you think about the cardboard cutouts last year at the stadiums during a COVID baseball season?
They're fine.
Okay, that's fine. That's fair.
They're fine. I didn't really have a strong feeling about it. It's better than empty seats, I guess.
Yeah.
My kids now, when they see baseball on, like to like identify whether it's fake people or real people in the crowd. That's the thing I've noticed. Like they were with their grandparents watching a spring training game the other day, and our younger son Marco, who's 3.5, said, "Oh, those are fake people." And I looked at the TV, and they were.
He's going to be a big fan of Invasion of the Body Snatchers when he gets to it.
It's a great movie. He's probably almost ready for it.
He designed these sunglasses that when he wears them, he can detect cardboard cutouts.
It's very weird imagery for seeing it, but at the end of baseball season, I was like, yeah, it's actually a lot of fun to see these wacky things.
You can kind of adjust to anything, it turns out.
Yeah. The ones they had for the Dodgers I saw looked pretty good, but they did some for the Kings, and it was like they didn't get the proportions right. So like the shoulders were like this, and then there'd be like a golden retriever wearing a Kings jersey, but like nobody's neck really fit onto the body of the cardboard cutout. Were they doing fake noise in the games?
They were, yeah. I think they even had the organist like in there pounding away during the fake games.
It's so like, why do we? It's not necessary. The thing is always delayed. So like in hockey there will be a save, and then 2 seconds later,
is any of it necessary? I mean, if we're talking about what's necessary with sports during a pandemic, especially,
it's essential.
Got me there.
It's essential. All those players who have gotten COVID, it was essential. What do you like to eat at Dodger Stadium? If we're doing stupid questions,
that's like a good question. Honestly, I'm not like a huge fan of Dodger dogs. They're fine. I like the grilled ones. When you gotta snag a grilled Dodger dog if you're gonna eat one. Because the steam ones I think are kind of gross. I used to like eating Carl's Jr. at Dodger games when they had it. I don't know why, but that was just like an association. They always had Carl's Jr. Dodger games, and I would get like a double Western cheeseburger, and that was somehow, or like Yoshinoya, all like the weird LA fast food restaurants that you could get at Dodger games. They had King Taco for a little bit, which I thought was like a pretty cool
That's a good
crossover
association.
event, but that didn't last long.
Crossover event. The things they have at Staples Center are so disappointing that they don't have more. They have like one local LA thing. They have Ludo Bird, which is
That's a chicken. That's okay.
yeah, it was really rich though, but like everything else is just like a Farmer John hot dog, which I guess is LA. But
The real answer to these questions is like at Dodger Stadium, you can bring your own food in. Go to like a good restaurant, get a sandwich, and bring it to the game.
Maybe
That's
a
what I usually do.
Philippe's.
I didn't know
Yep.
you could do that at Dodger
You can
Stadium.
you can bring Philippe's into Dodger Stadium. When I'm going from Culver City, I would bring a sandwich from Jackson Market to Dodger Stadium. Or when you're going to a Kings game, you can stop at the pantry for a meal beforehand, put some French fries in your pocket, and carry them into the stadium. It works really well.
Trust me, and it's delicious too. You know, one time my dad tried sneaking Cracker Jack into Staples Center, and they're so strict, but he had it like in, like Taxi Driver, like he had it in his jacket sleeves, and Cracker Jacks have that sort of aluminum inside of it, so they had to wand him. And he had to take 2 boxes of Cracker Jacks out of his sleeves and throw them away.
I hope somebody ate them at least.
Yeah.
They fed him to Adrian Kempe afterwards. Anything else you have, Greg?
No, just praise. I think that the book is wonderful, and I think you're a lot of fun to talk to, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad we could finally do this because I kept thinking like, well, the pandemic will be over and we could just go to Dodger Stadium. But now it's looking like there's going to be people doing something COVID related at Dodger Stadium for like 2 years now, probably.
Probably. But, it's finally being used for a public purpose again. So
Yeah,
there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, it became like the hub of public health in Los Angeles. So
I mean,
someone's happy
Good.
somewhere.
It's the parking lots of Dodger Stadium are so big. Like if you ever drive around when it's empty, it's crazy. And that space should be used for something. Like in the beginning of the pandemic, they had rental cars parked there. Did you ever see those clips?
No.
They
Oh,
the
yeah, I
airports
think I
were all
did.
shut down, and like they needed a place to keep all the cars because nobody was renting anything. So the Dodgers just rented out their lots to like Avis.
Beautiful.
The city is finally...
Nature is returning.